Thanks, Addy, and hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. It's still morning here in Singapore. That's where I'm based. And thank you for the intro. I think one of the reasons why I'm still excited about research is the tech angle, and it's an obvious one here today, but it does keep us interested and focused. I mean, when I first started, we were still doing telephone interviews and whatnot. So the tech angle definitely keeps us going and makes us better consultants because we can do things at a push of a button, which is what we're talking about today. Bit of background. So yeah, as I said, Raymond Lo. I work for a company called Picnic Customer Intelligence. We're a boutique research agency. We've got an office in Melbourne, Australia, but also one in Singapore here. I'm Australian Chinese, but I'm based in Singapore. So I've got a foot in both countries. My background, my ethnicity, but also my accent is Australian. So a bit of both. And yeah, we've been around for about 2 years. Our focus, we do a lot of product and pricing research. And we've used Question Pro a lot recently in applying Gabor Granger and also other techniques like Van Westendorp as well. But today the focus is on Gabor Granger, and we have some really cool examples of how we've used this tool to really help our clients. So yeah, let's get started. So look, I think before we begin, I'd like to just a very brief history lesson about Gabor Granger and who Gabor and Granger are, for those who don't know. So the first person is Sir Clive Granger. He's the Granger in Gabor Granger, and he was a British mathematician who focused on nonlinear time series research, and he actually won a Nobel Prize in 2003 in economic sciences, and he went to the University of Nottingham. That's Sir Clive Granger there. The Gabor in Gabor Granger. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get a picture of Dr. Andre Gabor. As much as I Googled and searched far and wide, for the help, it wasn't for a lack of trying. I just couldn't get a picture of him. So I had to show the other Gabor, Zaza Gabor, as a replacement. So I hope I don't offend any sort of family members of Andre Gabor on the line. But he also went to the University of Nottingham. And his work was primarily around, obviously, about pricing sensitivity and utilities as well. So he's the other half of Gabor and Gabor Granger. So could not find the real picture of Andre Gabor there.
Fair enough.
Now, in saying that, that's a bit of brief history lesson on Gabor Granger. My personal favourite mathematicians are these two fellows. I've noticed the audience, there's a large contingent from Australia and India. You may know them, or you may not know them. This is Mr. or Professors Duckworth and Lewis. They invented the Duckworth-Lewis-Stern system. There's a third person who I don't have the photo of. And this is obviously, as you know, used to calculate new run rates and new scores and new targets in the event of a rain-affected cricket match. We won't talk any further about that. I know India and Australia at the moment, and it's 2-0 up, but I won't mention any more about that. No, Kohli's coming back after the first test as well, which is quite damaging for your team, but we won't go any further on that topic.
It's a very sticky wicket, Raymond. It's a very sticky wicket.
Yes, I won't go any further. Okay, so enough about the history of Gabor Granger. Let's move on to something a bit more serious. So in terms of the broad pricing techniques that we can look at, and there's 3 here. There are a lot more, but these are the three core sort of techniques that we use and a lot of other agencies use as well. And today's all about Gabor Granger, but we wanted to position this against Van Westendorp and conjoint as well, just so you get a bit of context and a bit of know-how about when to use what. So starting from the left, well, Gabor Granger, quite simply, it gives you a price adoption curve for the overall product. So quite simply, as the slide there shows, at $4, how many people will buy my product? In this case, it's 9.4%. As I move along the scale, $6, $8, $10, how many will buy our product? Very, very, very simple, very, very elegant, but very powerful in helping businesses make decisions. It can tell you how steep the curve is, where you really lose customers, where it's very elastic. It can answer a lot of questions. And ultimately, it can provide you with the optimal price point. So in this example, maybe at $6, the take-up is 6.8%, but from a revenue perspective, it's optimal as well. We can make that calculation on the back end. So it's very powerful in that respect. Look, it's magnetic, so it's looking at one particular product. So it doesn't take into account the competitive context, which something like conjoint, the third thing we're showing here, will show. So that's a limitation to take into account. But yeah, price adoption curve for Gabor Granger. The middle one, which is called Van Westendorp, is all about what's an acceptable price range for the product. You've got a lot of curves here, and the curves are just looking at prices that people talk about in terms of being too cheap, expensive, or too expensive. And it's just a cumulative distribution across those 4 price points. The idea behind this is to find what's an acceptable range, what is fair and reasonable to the customer. It doesn't necessarily, although it purports to, but it doesn't necessarily answer the question of demand. What price will people actually buy at? It'll tell you what they think is reasonable and fair and what price is too low or too high, but it doesn't actually answer the question of demand. So typically, when we've done Van Westendorps in the past, we've mixed it up with a Gabor Granger. So one tells you the range, and one tells you, okay, at that particular price, this is the adoption or take up. So the two work well hand in hand, and obviously QPro has the capabilities of answering both of these questions in its setup and software. So it's really good in that perspective. The very last one is, I mean, it's the Rolls Royce of pricing. So it's a conjoint, and most of you will know about this. I mean, for this particular technique, it's a bit more arduous for the customer to respond in the survey because they go through rounds and rounds of different scenarios. But what I can tell you is a willingness to pay for a number of features. So while Van Westendorp and Gabor Granger talk about take up and acceptable price for the product overall, conjoint tells you, well, if I break this product up into different parts, how much is someone willing to pay for part A versus part B versus part C? So that's the beauty of it. And because it's so powerful, it can also look at things like market share as well, because it includes the competitive context, which Gabor Granger doesn't have. So it's more powerful in that respect. And also it can tell you, look, this is the product we're selling. This is the optimal product configuration, the best features to pull, to talk about, and also the price points. So it's not just isolated on price, it's isolated on all the features and talking about all the features as well. So that's the effectiveness of the conjoint. So they're the 3 techniques, but today obviously we're honing in on Gabor Granger. So how does it work? So this is how it works. You know, as a researcher, we have to know the ins and outs of how something works when the client asks us. And the idea is that the goal is to find the highest price a consumer is willing to pay. And that particular price point goes into that elasticity curve that we saw in the previous slide. To determine this, and this is exactly how it works and how it's coded, and I'll walk you through this, but I mean, again, QPro makes it very easy because you simply press a button and it works. But in the back end, this is how it works. Assume we have 5 price points, $1, $2, $3, $4, and $5. We want to know which price point is the highest the consumer is willing to pay, so we can actually create that curve. So from this point onwards, a consumer starts at one of the price points at random. Okay, they can start at $1, $2, $3, $4, $5. Let's say for this example, they start at $3. And we asked them, would you buy this product at $3? If they say they would buy it at $3, then we show them a randomly higher price. If they say they would not buy at $3, we show them a randomly lower price. And we keep moving up and down until we find the highest price they are willing to pay, including, and this is very important for us as researchers, when we look at the analysis, including those who are not willing to pay anything. So even at the $1 price point, they can say no, but we need to know what cohort actually wouldn't pay. So we know the curve, but also how many would not pay at all. So that's how we work out the highest price point someone's willing to pay, and that feeds into our elasticity curve. It's quite subtle. There's a bit of coding in the back end, but yeah, obviously we lean on QuestionPro to work this out. And all we need to give for the software is the 5 or 6 price points. And that's the beauty of Gabor Granger. So why we love it, we really love it. So moving left to right, it's simple yet powerful. So it cannot be more simple than to ask someone, would they pay for something, and then move up and down the price points. But the final outcome of this is so impactful for a business that we're consulting to and the advice we give to them. So they can really make critical decisions around pricing from a very simple question type. I said before in the middle here, it's very easy to execute. So literally in Question Pro, we just put in the 6, in this case, price points, and that's it. And we just press the button and we go. So it's very easy to execute. We obviously change the name here, a few things to change, but otherwise it's very easy to execute. As opposed to actually in the past, as a more of a history lesson, when we've done this without the benefit of a software like Question Pro, we had to actually manually code this or get someone to manually write the script for this, which can take a bit of time because you have to plan every particular scenario. Now we can do it so much quicker, so we can have more time for the consulting end, which is my third point here. We get the price curve, and it's very, very nice to look at, and it tells us about adoption, but at the end of the day, we need to consult with this data, and there's still a lot of adjustments and filters we have to apply to the data points before we can tell the client, hey, this is really the demand for your product. So yes, our role is not diminished in any way as researchers. Question Pro really facilitates us doing Gabor Granger, but then at the end of the day, we're still there to consult. And I'll give you some examples that talk to this. Okay, so enough about the sort of the history lesson, Duckworth, Lewis, Stern, India, Australia cricket. Enough about that. Let's, and how Gabor Granger works. These are some case studies we're very proud of. It's 3 case studies. They're all a little bit different. The products are different each time. The impact on the business is a bit different each time. And we've been a bit clever in how we've used Gabor Granger. The input is quite simple. Give us your price points, and then the data comes out on the back end. But I think what we've applied and what we've done has been quite clever. So I'll show you each of these and highlight those. So the first example we've got here is an entertainment feature. It's obviously it's client confidentiality, so let's just call it an entertainment feature for now. And some of these figures have been adjusted, but the story can remain largely the same. So the idea here was the client came to us and said, oh, we've got 4 price points, 10, 15, 20, 25. What price point should we launch at to maximize, let's say, revenue, but also not compromise demand as well? So we said, okay, let's use Gabor Granger. And this is the curve that we came out with. So obviously the line here talks about demand or take up. So 12.5% at $10 and then down to 6% for $25. But what we also did was in the blue bars, we calculated what the revenue is at each of these price points. So there's always a sweet spot where we balance out demand and revenue. And in this case, it's $20. $20 gives you very good, or gives you the highest revenue, and the demand is still quite robust. So we said, look, this is probably your sweet spot from both a volume and revenue perspective. Now this is directly from the output from Gabor Granger, so it's a bit blunt. And obviously as consultants, we have to go a bit further than this. And this leads me on to my next slide. So that's half the picture, right? The other half is, okay, how do we adjust these numbers for market factors? And this is where us as researchers really come in to our strengths in terms of adjusting for market factors. So the research is telling us this, how do we adjust it? So look, again, I've had to change a few numbers and block a few things out, but some of the inputs to consider after you get the Gabor Granger outputs are obviously the size of the market, because you want to have that percentage extrapolate to number of people. So we had to have that as an input, but also the take-up. Gabor Granger assumes take-up is at full awareness, full access, and it's the maximum take-up we'll ever achieve because everyone's aware, everyone can access it, and it's performing beautifully as described by the concept. But as we know, when products roll out, there's always, and with Q Pro, different versions come out, there's always a rollout adoption. So year 1, year 2, year 3, we had to help them estimate what the rollouts would be. And we have some other data from the research, but also, as consultants, we know roughly from other research that we've done with this client, what we can get over time. The price is price. And then as I said, we adjust for a lot of reality adjustments in the market. So there's the awareness, and the awareness changes over time. We even looked at those there's people who don't qualify for the product. You will not benefit from this product because you don't do X, Y, and Z. So that was taken into account. And even product returns was taken into account as well. So all this goes into the mix. Gabor Granger gives us one line, which is a very powerful line in terms of take-up, but all these other factors play a role as well. Okay, second example. It's a slightly quirkier one. We normally use Gabor Granger with prices, okay, 10, 15, 25. In this situation, we actually use Gabor Granger to decide what is the best discounting rate for a retailer. So the question was to us, hey, we discount a lot, like every other retailer. What level should we discount at? And also for how long? Should the discount be for 2 weeks of the month, 3 weeks? Should it be, we know about the Black Friday sales in Singapore here. There's a great Singapore sales, which last for a month. So the frequency of discounting was also key. So we actually used Gabor Granger for it, with adjustments, obviously. But in this example, we showed that, hey, only 30% of people really buy at full price. And that's the nature of a lot of retailers and their industry now. And, as we go along the discounting curve, you can see how elastic it is. At 30%, we're getting 76% people buying. So we applied it to understand what level of discounting is optimal, because at 30% discount, they're still making an okay margin. So what's the sweet spot there? I said before, what's key is to overlay the revenue impact on top of this, but also the length of discount, which we had to calculate. So as I said, Gabor Granger gives us really good, useful information, but there's other numbers that go into the recommendations and decision factors for the client. Also, the impact on brand and long-term behavior were more overarching strategic factors for consideration. So, these are some other data points. They're not real, but we looked at questions like, I generally look for large discounts and will wait for a product to be on sale. The product is not worth its full retail price. So there's a brand impact, strategic impact on the brand. If you discount so much, does a customer feel ripped off if they pay the full recommended retail price? So yeah, we're stretching Gabor Granger to talk more about strategic pricing in this particular quirky example. Okay, the last one, another slightly quirkier example. So this is a business enhancement for subscription product. And for this particular one, again, it's using Gabor Granger, okay, the same technique we've always looked at. But the client came to us and said, oh, we have two different subscription models. One is where they buy for the month. So you pay one price and it lasts for the whole month. And one is actually, we want to give this to them for 2 days only. Which model works and at which price point? So again, we said, yeah, Gabor Granger works for this. We just have to apply it in a more nuanced fashion. And some customers got exposed to the monthly prices and the monthly pricing structure. And some customers got exposed to the 2-day one. So you can see there's different curves, different relationships. And again, you can multiply this out by revenue. So yeah, they have to make that decision on monthly or 2 days. And there's obviously a lot of other aspects to take into account, like customer experience, whether or not, 2 days, customers will opt in enough times to buy that. But purely and simply, the curves go a long way in helping us make a decision about which pricing model to go with as well. Okay, this is my last slide, and I think timing's quite good. So look, just a summary of Gabor Granger. Look, know when to use Gabor Granger versus other techniques. If we're honing in on price and price demand, Gabor Granger is great. Obviously, if we need to look at willingness to pay for features and other certain features and market share, something a bit more complex, obviously conjoint comes into play here. But if we're isolating just the price points for a particular product or service, Gabor Granger is great for that particular use case. Again, it's simple. It's it's so simple to explain. Yet the impacts are powerful and worth billions of dollars to any client we work with. Third point, Q-Pro makes it easier for us, right? It is Gabor Granger at the press of a button. Well, more maybe 3 or 4 buttons, but it's very, very easy versus customizing it and coding it from scratch, which we have done in the past. So yeah, we're grateful for having this tool. Obviously, the art is in the interpretation adjustment for market factors. It's the other half of the picture is really in what we do with the data. So, as consultants, we play a big role in the interpretation and adjustment, as we've shown before. And the very last point is, yeah, typically it's applied for price points, but why not? It can be applied for discounting factors or what percentage discount clients are going for. It can be applied for different pricing models. If it's a monthly price, annual price, daily price, weekly price, we know what it does, but we can apply it in other pricing situations because, every day the new software companies come out with new pricing models. It could be try before you buy as well. So we can use the tool and make it fit some of the new pricing models that are emerging out there as well. So it's even more powerful than we'd imagined with new use cases, coming around the corner all the time. So yeah, that's the summary. That's it from me about Gabor Granger.
Awesome.
Any
Beautiful
comments, questions?
We have 2 questions. Number 1 is, when you run a research, I'm just going to paraphrase a little. When you run a research like Gabor Granger, is there a sample set or number of what is the sample size that you typically go for when it's something like a price for, let's say, a product like a shoe, right? Do you have a recommendation of what the sample size should be like?
Yep. So sample size considerations are the same considerations as you would apply for any quant research.
Got it.
So, if you want to have a robust finding for anything for quant research, we usually say 150 to 200 minimum for a particular cohort, because that gives you a certain confidence level. I don't know what it is off by heart, but obviously there's confidence interval calculators out there. But for a particular cohort, for one product that we're looking at, we would say a minimum of 200 is the right sample size. Now, obviously, because Gabor Granger is quite simple, if you wanted to test 2 products in the survey, you can rotate them. So half the sample sees product 1, half the sample sees product 2. You can do that because the line of questioning is quite straightforward. So then that way you can get 2 products done with 1 sample of 200 rather than doubling your sample and spending more money on sample costs.
Got it. Fantastic. That does make sense. I think the last one for you is, does Gabor Granger also allow you to understand demand in any way, or is it something that you have to just adopt based on the pricing response that you're getting? Do you guys usually run something apart from this to understand demand also, or can you actually just have a hybrid version wherein you can do a little bit of demand understanding as well as price sensitivity?
Yeah, I mean, the curve at a concept level does give us an indication of demand. We do cross-validate, that curve with other data points. So it's such a big, important decision, right? What price should we launch at? So we talked about some of the adjustment factors we looked at, like awareness, build up over time, but also within the survey itself, we have other data points that we validate against. So a simple purchase intent question can validate against it. Gabor Granger is not purchase intent. You have a separate purchase intent. You have an interest question you can validate. And even as far as recently, we've done some prototyping work, which is simply, asking the customer, hey, look, if you're really interested, why don't you leave your name behind and we can give you a call back to see if when it's ready, we can give you a call. So it just frames it in this super real reality. And because then they have to leave their name and email address. So there's a commitment there. So we triangulate everything. So we triangulate with adjusting for those awareness factors, but also there's other data points we get in the survey because we don't want to show the client something that looks not real, right? It has to have face validity first and foremost.
Right. Makes sense. Beautiful. I think that's all we have for today. At least, obviously, we have a couple of more questions, but I think we're going to stick to the schedule. Thank you, Raymond, for the beautiful presentation, short and sweet and to the point. I think I really liked it, and this is how we officially launch Gabor Granger for Question Pro. It's going to be live soon, so everybody should have access to it too. Thank you again.